Hello everyone, welcome back to Grim Dawn. You might notice that my experience bar is a bit more full than it was in the previous episode. This is because I just made an attempt at trying to get a replacement scepter of a new cultist scepter. I failed, I did not get one, but an attempt was made. Now, you might be wondering, where did I look for this? I looked for it in the Depraved Sanctuary, which isn't the greatest necessarily place to look for these, but at this particular point in the game it is. I went into the Depraved Sanctuary because of all the cultists there, obviously. Now, you might be wondering, Professor, why didn't you record this? I intend to record that, but later. I didn't want to record it quite so early, because I wanted to show you roughly at what level you should be what levels you should be thinking about no longer visiting the Depraved Sanctuary on Veteran. Since on Elite there's much less of a problem, the level caps for everywhere in Elite obviously are much higher, so it's less of a problem in Elite. I think maybe I can't remember what the level cap is in that area for Elite, but it's pretty high, and I've never really had any serious problems farming there at any point during an Elite run. And obviously in Ultimate there's no limit at all, so that's very much whatever. Well, technically there's no limit. I think the technical limit is over 100, which you can only reach 100 yourself, so that's kind of a moot point. But I would like to get... I'll record a run-through of that area of the Depraved Sanctuary when I'm roughly in the late 30s. Between 35 and 40. I'll actually go in there and record, because that's going to really be pushing the upper limit of what the enemies are going to spawn in as, if I remember correctly. I might have to double-check my numbers there. I have a hard time remembering the level cap for Depraved Sanctuary on Veteran. But that's when I'm going to cover that. Anyways, first we're going to be obviously fighting good old Golgoth here, who, as you can see, is kind of a pain in the neck. He hits pretty hard. I only have one potion. But if you have a ranged ability, this really isn't going to be too much of a problem. Actually, I think I can melee him here. Yes. And then we get level 5, which is huge. Okay, good. Now that we've hit level 5, I'm going to really quickly go back and create a relic for a very specific reason. Oh, wait, isn't that? Yeah, it's right over here. I got lost mildly for a second there. Alright. So, relics are nice. Relics are really nice. You can first actually technically start making them at level 18. There's a couple of level 18 ones. These are very rarely worth it, because there's only 3 or 4 off the top of my head that I can think of that you actually have access to, and only a couple of masteries can use them effectively. But we're looking for corruption right now, so we're just going to go ahead and make that. It's already in there. I get a completion bonus of 7% pierce resistance, which is really nice at this particular point. Also, the corruption skill is also really nice, because that is going to reduce enemies' resistances. Not by a whole lot, but this early in the game, that little bit does help. By the way, while farming for scepters that I didn't get, I got miasma robes and this nifty little piece. And I also got some shoulder plates that increase second right, as well as torso armor that also increased my armor stat, which is really important because I've mentioned in the previous episode that I was having a problem with my armor stat. Now that we've killed the troll, however, we can potentially go... we have 2 options, actually. The first option is to go through the Hannesy mine. The Hannesfee? I think it might be the Hannesfee. I can't quite remember. We can go through here, come out on the other side, and there is a side boss in here you can fight that has a chance of dropping a medal that increases the Hellhound skill. If you're an occultist and you intend on going for that, or a pet build in general, it's worth going through here. I'm not looking to do that, so I'm not going to go through there, because I want to talk about a completely different optional fight that you can take on that is substantially more interesting, potentially more rewarding, and much more difficult. We're actually going to put our rift down right here. We're going to clear these guys out right here first. Now, I shouldn't have used that right then and there. Now, where is he? we actually should probably clear out these guys first. Now, we have good old champion of the pit there. There's actually a couple of different champions of the pit that can spawn in there. But I can't remember if he's the one that has the medal. There's a medal that's very important to get if you are really concerned about crowd control, like being rooted and stuff. I generally only get concerned about that in hardcore, so I usually only go for this in hardcore. Let me see. But he's a pain in the neck to deal with, because he is an absolute menace. Now, is he the one with the stun jacks? No. Okay. So he's the one that summons the Wind Devils. You're going to have that, and then we're going to back up here. And then, oh, you've put that down, so we're going to move back here. You don't want to fight him near the Wendigo Totem he puts down, because that's just going to heal him. Okay, he hits way harder. My armor isn't high enough for this. So the fact that he's going to keep putting on those nets, I have to use my health potion here. That's invincible still. All right. I was wondering if they ever changed that, but they did not. Because I know they did an update recently. I was checking, and I don't remember. I couldn't remember if they changed that or not. They did not, clearly. So we're just going to go ahead and poison him from a distance. Now, in Veteran, probably a lot of you aren't going to be able to fight him one-on-one. The only mastery I've been able... Well, there's two masteries that I've been able to succeed at fighting him mano-a-mano with. That would be Soldier and Oathkeeper. Very specifically. These are the only two masteries that I have been able to get to fight one of the champions, any one of the champions of the pit, mano-a-mano. There is one exception. There's 3 different champions of the pit that can spawn in there. And one of them throws just a stupid amount of stun jacks. This guy cannot be fought one-on-one in close range. You will just get stunned. You will get stun locked. I'm not even kidding. It's one of the most annoying optional fights in the game, hands down, just because he can stun lock you. Now, later on in the game, when you have some actual higher levels of stun resistance, this is less of a concern. But in Veteran, you're probably not going to have the level of stun resistance you would need to not get stun locked. So it generally isn't a good idea to fight that particular guy in close range, at least at Veteran difficulty. I cannot for the life of me remember his actual name. I just know he's the Stun Jack Pitmaster. Pit Champion, whatever. He's rough for just the Stun Jacks alone. Beyond him, you can fight the other two with Oathkeeper and Soldier mano-a-mano. Now, this is also actually, if you've never fought Cronley before, this is actually good warm-up for this, because this is roughly the strategy you're going to be using against Cronley as well. Cronley just isn't quite as annoying as the champions tend to be, because the champions have all kinds of... Brawler's Distinction, by the way, is what you're fighting for. I'm pretty sure I've never actually gone in... Hey, those are really sweet gloves. I've never actually gone and checked this, but I believe all of them have a chance of dropping Brawler's Distinction. Now, this is really important for hardcore because the reduced stun duration, the reduced freeze duration, the reduced entrapment duration, and the reduced petrify duration. If you're playing hardcore Grim Dawn, very likely, if you die, it's either going to be to a boss, or it's going to be because some random enemy has slapped some crowd control on you and you couldn't escape a really ugly situation and you died. Brawler's Exhaustion is nice, but it's only really effective against that only really matters in certain specific instances. Generally, the Brawler's Exhaustion isn't what you're equipping that for. You're equipping it for the reduced crowd control duration. Now, I'm not going to be equipping that here because this is not hardcore. I can die if I want to, and I can leave your friends behind. But that doesn't change the fact that if you are in hardcore, you really want that. And you're just going to have to take a ranged ability and just basically play Ring Around the Rosie with whatever lunatic shows up in the pit. That's basically how that's going to go down. By the way, free dynamite here, which is always really appreciated. So just keep that in mind for hardcore. If you really want to, I do recommend it. Because most of my deaths are because I got entrapped by something or other and then just died. Because I couldn't get away from the guys wailing on me. And I think you're going to find that that's going to be the biggest threat to you for the most part in hardcore as well, assuming you're building like a sane person, like I don't. I like to mix it up a little bit, as you can see. Boom. Alright. Slap. Oh, there's usually There's usually a lot of heroes in this area for Cronley's gang. This is actually really nice if you're trying to farm Devil's Crossing reputation, which I do need to talk about, and I will talk about that this episode, because I don't actually intend on getting into Cronley's mine. By the way, you might have seen Stunjacks there. This is not the pit guy that throws the Stunjacks. This is not the same dude. You can actually fight him mano a mano. I'm waiting for the correct opportunity. I'm waiting for him to throw the Stunjacks one more time, and then I'm going to engage him in melee. Come on. There they are. Alright, here we go. That is not where I sent that, but okay. That's fine. Alright, so. Oh, nope, I don't have any healing items. I ran out of healing potions. Oh, there we go. Incendiary shoulder plates that I really don't actually need, but I'll grab them for selling anyways. Now, there's probably going to be another hero in the next area. There usually is, so just prepare yourselves for that. Usually it's a really tanky guy, so he's not usually threatening in a damage perspective. He's just going to waste your time while the other guys kill you. Yep. The wall, yep. The usual. He's usually who I get here. I don't know if other people have different experiences, like if they get a different hero usually. Like if their go-to hero for this location is someone different. I don't know. All I know is that this is usually who shows up here. Sometimes it's someone else. Sometimes there's no one at all. But it's definitely always an experience. There we go. Oh, that's kind of nonsense, but okay. We're going to go down here just because there's usually chests down here. Good. Alright. Yep, plenty of chests today. Good. Sometimes there's only one. One or two times I've gotten none. That might have been that was a while ago, so they probably updated that out. Unless I've just been very lucky. I'm not really ever sure of the odds of things spawning like that. I don't generally calculate that or look that up because I just don't need to know the percentages. My viewpoint on the percentages of things spawning in games is if it spawns and I gotta deal with it. If it doesn't, that's fine. I can understand if you were trying to speedrun the game why you would want to know those odds, but for casual play, I really don't care. And I am not a speedrunner of this game, so, again, I don't care. Now, let's talk about faction experience here, because you probably have noticed this by now in your playthrough, and I haven't talked about it, and there's a couple of reasons why I haven't talked about it. Let's just sell stuff really quick here. Now, the primary reason I haven't really discussed faction reputation is because most likely you're not going to need to care for a little while. Alright, every time you kill enemies of a specific group, particularly heroes, you get faction reputation, which as you get increased reputation with factions over time, you will wind up being able to buy more and more stuff from their faction-specific merchant. Now, you can just hit J and you can find out the level of reputation, and I referenced this in the previous episode where I opened up a specific quest with the Rovers due to being at a friendly reputation level with them. This is what I was talking about. Now I'll talk about the reputation of enemies when that becomes really important. It's not yet important. I will let you know when it is. At this early point in the game, it's really not going to matter what your faction reputation is with the enemy factions. That becomes important in higher difficulties. Again, we'll talk about that when the time comes. Don't worry about it for now. Right now, we're talking about Devil's Crossing, and when you're just highlighting a faction tells you how you get reputation for them, Devil's Crossing is actually the painiest to increase the faction reputation for, because the enemies that you get reputation from them They're only Cronley's gang guys, and they're only in very specific areas of the game. Alright? There are far fewer Cronley's gang members wandering around the world than most other factions. Okay? So Devil's Crossing tends to be past this act, past Act 2, Cronley's gang. You're really not going to see a lot of reputational increases for Devil's Crossing. Almost all reputation gains for Devil's Crossing happens in the early game. This is why, even when you boost up to higher difficulties, it's always a good idea to do all of the Devil's Crossing quests. Alright, you can do bounties, but quite frankly, I find bounties to be a very slow process, at least at this point in the game, at least when you're on Veteran. I usually will reserve bounties for higher difficulties. Typically, I'll start in on them towards the second half of Epic. Sometimes I'll do it a little bit later. I very rarely bother with bounties at the Veteran difficulty level. It just takes too long. And also, if a bounty is given to you in an area you are wicked overleveled for, the gains from going in there and completing the bounty are much lower because all of the flunkies you're fighting through are too low of a level to give you experience or even any good equipment. So I typically hold off on this for at least Epic difficulty. Typically I'll wait until the second half of Epic difficulty, like I said, specifically so that way I know that the enemies will be scaling pretty close to me at the very least, and I can just actually go in there and get a decent amount of farm for myself if I decide I need it. So if you're on Veteran, generally it's a better idea to ignore the bounties because you're not going to get as much out of them in the Veteran difficulty than you are later on in Epic and Ultimate. Now, that being said, you might be wondering, well, Professor, doesn't that cause a bit of a problem? What if I want some really specific equipment out of the Merchant for Devil's Crossing? Well, let's talk about the Merchant for Devil's Crossing. Now, I'm at Friendly, so all I have is access to these. And generally speaking, I don't really go in for these a whole lot unless I'm having a really hard time with a specific boss, which is rare. But what is the next one? What do you call this again? Respected, that's it. You can get to here, and these items have a required level of 35, and I'm going to be really honest, besides the recipes, which I already know, and you probably won't know, but you will want, because a lot of these recipes are really useful, these pieces of equipment are very quickly outpaced by just any of the green things that you can care to pick up. These are very rarely going to remain strong enough for you to use in the long term, so these are generally a waste of money. Okay? And then you get to this point. Now, this is really where things start to turn around and you actually get some pretty useful stuff out of most faction vendors. You get these really nice augments, which require to be level 40, and you get access to these badges. Now, honestly, by the time you get to the badges, by the time you get to Honored, you probably are well past level 40. The main point here is the augmentations, which are incredibly useful. You can see, not this one. You can see this one right here, an increase in vitality and aether damage, which would be absolutely incredible for me because obviously I am an occultist arcanist combination. You can already see where this would be very, very useful for me. And that's something I don't really expect to see until Epic, because I very likely am either going to get to or come very close to getting to Respected. But I don't particularly care beyond the new quest that's going to give me experience, because there's nothing at the Respected level that I actually would care to purchase, because I know from experience that it's going to be replaced pretty quickly. Which is why I don't recommend a lot of people even bother with that kind of nonsense. Now, the Rovers are how do I put this? The Rovers are a little bit easier to gain reputation with than Devil's Crossing because Arcovian undead show up all over the place in the weirdest locations. Unlike Cronley's gang, who only show up in, I think, one other area outside of the desert-like area that I'm in now. Arkovian undead show up in a whole bunch of those little side dungeons that you've been seeing me go into. They're all over the place. And as a result, you will see slightly faster faction gains here than you would with Devil's Crossing. Now you might be wondering, well, Professor, these two are both kind of painy to actually increase the reputation for. Why? Short answer is because they're the first factions you see, and so to prevent them from getting a huge reputation boost, or from you getting a huge reputation boost and ignoring the other faction options, there just is, it's very slow going to get these because of the targets, so to speak. Arkovian undead, while they do appear in a variety of strange places, are still best regarded as uncommon, and Cronley's gang is limited to 2 specific areas of the game and nothing else. The rest of the factions tend to target much more available enemies. For instance, in a couple of episodes from now, I'm going to be getting into Homestead. That has its own faction and faction reputation as a result. Their target enemy are beasts, and obviously, beasts are absolutely everywhere. Okay? And honestly, in almost all of my characters, I've actually reached the highest reputation level with Homestead first, before Devil's Crossing, before the Rovers, before literally any other faction, simply because of how widespread beasts are. Alright, it's also at Homestead that we're going to get our last Devil's Crossing quest, our technically last Devil's Crossing quest finished, and that's going to be it for our Devil's Crossing reputation for most of the game at that point, if not all the game. But that's basically how that works. But you're really not going to be equipping any of these items for long. You're only going to be really here for the relic recipes, or actually all the recipes, because these are all permanent. But you're really only going to be here for the recipes. I already have them, as I mentioned earlier, so I don't care either way. I mean, consider, for instance, just 10 levels higher, we've got 294. I'll come back to this. When I'm about level 35, I'll come back to this and do a comparison for you, and then I'll go into the Depraved Sanctuary. Sometime between 35 and 40 is when I'm going to do this, but I'll come back here and I'll talk about the actual differences here, why you wouldn't want to equip these in most situations, things like that. But for now, that's all I've got for this episode, so thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below, and thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.